Hello, and welcome to something a little bit different here. I've never done Dominions on this channel before, even though it is probably my favorite game of all time, Dominions 5, Warriors of the Faith. It's a fascinatingly deep, complex strategy game, and I've been toying around with wanting to do some recording of it for quite some time now. Unfortunately, I don't have the time or the dedication to be able to do a full let's play or playthrough of it in a big multiplayer game, like Lucid Tactics and some of the other YouTubers do. It's just a massive time investment, I think, that I couldn't afford to manage or organize. But an opportunity presented itself where I am going to be playing a short 1-versus-1 blitz game against a buddy of mine named Battlemode, who you probably know from Explorminate or his own channel. He's definitely more internet famous than I am. But we decided we had a little bit of free time where our schedules meshed up, and we wanted to play a blitz against each other, and we both decided to record it and upload it to our respective YouTube channels so that people could watch from both sides, which we thought would be kind of neat. So I wanted to take you through my nation here and do a short overview for it. I am not a master at this nation. I am, as a matter of fact, I would argue probably pretty mediocre. Okay. So I've never played Man before, which is the nation that I'm going to be playing as here. And playing as middle-aged man, and it is a new experience for me. I've never even played these guys in single player, apart from a little bit of expansion testing last night after we decided on our factions. But I'm going to be playing as man, and Battlemode is going to be playing as Shinuyama. So we've got King Arthur versus Japanese demon goblins, which is kind of cool. And it's interesting because they're both, I would argue, mid-game powers. Like, neither of them have an exceptionally strong early game. They don't have powerful sacreds. So I think they're a good matchup for each other. We have finished the game now. I'm recording this after the fact, and it turned out to be quite a bit of fun. And yeah, so we don't actually play through to the bitter end. We basically play until a victor is obvious, just due to map control and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and the other nice thing about it is it only lasted it was less than 2 hours, I think, so should be able to get a nice short little series out of it that you should be able to watch from both sides and see the decision-making process and all that sort of stuff. Keeping in mind, too, because it is a blitz, you're playing pretty quickly, and mistakes get made on both sides. So that is an important factor to consider. But anyhow, let's take a look at Man here. So Man is a really cool nation. They're basically based around King Arthur and some of that idea. The Knights of the Round Table and the Motte d'Arthur, that sort of stuff. And wanted to start out by kind of going through some of the... Well, I'll read this for you first. The realm of man is a feudal kingdom. Their kingdom was established by conquering a race of tall and magically powerful beings known as the Tuatha. When the Tuatha were destroyed, their greatest treasure was found, the magical forest of Avalon. Hidden deep within was great magic. The witches of man entered the forest, learned the old lore, and helped man grow in power and influence. The infantry of man is limited and lacks heavy troops. Their regular armies most often consist of powerful knights and skilled longbowmen. The witches train their own special troops, the Wardens and Knights of Avalon. These troops are very skilled and are also magically enchanted by the witches. The monks who serve the god of man are divinely inspired scholars who gather and record knowledge in the monasteries scattered throughout the land. Descendants of the Logrian people displaced by the witches and their servants dwell outside the fortified castles of the nobility. So there's a couple really cool things about this nation. The first is you get some really cool foreign recruit options. Foreign recruit just means anything that does not require a fort to recruit. Normally when you're playing, like if I wanted to recruit these tower guard, they can only be recruited in one of my forts. They have, out of their troop lineup though, you can recruit these guys, the Logrian warriors, from any province that you own, and you can recruit these guys, the Logrian cavalry, out of any province that you own, which is cool. Very powerful ability to be able to sort of bulk up your armies from outside your forts. You can also recruit these foresters out of any forest province that you control, and you can recruit these royal foresters out of any forest province you control. The monks can be recruited outside of forts. You just need to have a temple, though I don't end up relying on that really, because because of the circumstances of the game. You'll see why I don't recruit monks. Then basically the Bakemono, the little goblin dudes, can raid very, very well, and having undefended temples scattered about just doesn't work. I guess let's go through their mage lineup first, or their commander lineup first. So you've got the Royal Forester. He is a stealthy scout with a little bit of leadership ability, not much, but he can lead stealthy troops around and do some of that sort of shenanigans. You've got the Castilian, who is basically a generic commander. He's got decent leadership. He can do formations. And yeah, he exists to command troops and move them around. The monks are really neat. Normally, only mages are able to research, and monks are not mages. In this case, though, they have this ability called Divine Insights, which means that they are able to research. Now, you can only have a number of monks researching equal to the power of your god's domain in that province. And I think they still need a lab. At least I wasn't able to get them researching outside of a lab. But what that means is if you've got a Dominion 5, you can get 5 of these guys researching. They only do 3 research, so they are not hugely powerful researchers, but they're very cheap researchers. And because as man, as we'll get to later, you've got a lot of air magic, you can give these guys owl quills and they actually become very efficient researchers. So they're pretty neat. The bards are just nature 1 mages, moderate researchers. They can definitely do a little bit of research. They're stealthy, and they're also spies. So they can instill uprisings and stuff like that in enemy territory, which is kind of cool. I do end up building one. He never really sees much use. Like I get him onto Shinuyama's cap towards the end of the game. But in a bigger game, I think these guys would be a lot more useful. You've got the Daughters of Avalon, who are basically, they can either be Air 1, Nature 1, or 2 Nature. Just fairly standard low-powered mage. The Mother of Avalon, who's kind of the backbone of your mage core. These guys can be Air 2 or Nature 3, and then have a chance of one of those, or Air 1, Nature 2, or da-da-da-da-da, depending on how the randoms come out. And then the Knight Commander, he's a powerful leader, good in a fight himself. You could thug him out a little bit if you wanted to. The Lord Warden is your only sacred sort of fighty commander. These mages are sacred as well. The mothers and daughters are sacred as well, but he's your only really fighty commander. Cool thing about him is he is stealthy, so he can sneak around and do stuff, which is makes him potentially leading either foresters or also potentially your wardens, who are the troop version of the Lord Warden, basically, and also stealthy. So they can run around and do some cool stuff there. Again, not something that ends up happening in this game, but it's there as a possibility. The Crone of Avalon is your big, powerful cap-only mage. They can get air, water, earth, or nature, in addition to already being air 2 and nature 3. Very slight chance they could get nature or air 4, which is an important point to hit if you want to start boosting up, but only a very small chance of that actually happening. These guys are slow to recruit, quite expensive, but worth having a couple of them around probably, especially as like big communion leaders and stuff like that. And I'm going to circle back to the communions in just a moment here because that's an important thing for this nation. And then last up, you've got these Logrian wise men, who are your only access to fire and your only real reliable access to Earth 2. So they're kind of neat as well. They can only be recruited in a province that doesn't have a fort in it. You have to have a lab, but you cannot have a fort, which makes for an interesting situation where, again, I don't end up building them because the little goblins raid around so much. So I don't end up building any of these guys, but again, in a longer game, I think these guys are pretty important for getting you access to some of those paths. Not good researchers, though. That is one thing, is they are not much good at research. Now, as for troops, you've got the Logrian slingers, who are they've got a sling and an axe. I recruit some. I don't use them, really, but I do recruit a couple of these. Longbowmen are quite powerful. They've got fairly high damage, long range archers, basically. They can do a lot of damage to lightly armored units at a very long range. Very effective unit. The spearman is basically a generic heavy infantry. He has protection of 9. Actually, he's not even as good as a lot of heavy infantry. He's kind of an early age heavy infantry, I guess. But he's got mediocre armor, he's got a shield, he's got a hat, and a spear. Nothing special there. Long spear is the same deal, he just has a slightly longer spear, which means he can do a little bit of repelling. These Logrian warriors, I think, are quite a key component of man's army. They have a very high damage axe at 19 damage. They've got more hit points than an average human troop. Again, not really great armor, but they're solid medium infantry. They also have a javelin that does quite a bit of damage. So you can... I lean on these guys as kind of my front line pretty heavily. Especially because they can be recruited outside of forts. So you grab a bunch of them from just random provinces and you can start to amass some pretty significant armies just out and about. And they're inexpensive enough, like they're only 12 gold a pop, so if you end up losing a province to raiding or something like that and some of these guys die in the process, it's not the end of the world. So yeah. Tower Guard are pretty solid heavy infantry. They've got 13 protection, which is respectable for the middle age. They've got a helmet and a shield and all that good stuff. They also give you a castle defense bonus. So if you're worried about being besieged, you can stack up a bunch of these guys in a fort and they will make it a lot tougher for the enemy to actually crack it. Foresters are neat as well. They can be recruited from any forest province that you control. And the cool thing about them is they're dual wielding these, the dagger and the axe, and then they've also got a bow. So against lightly armored stuff, these guys could be quite effective raiders. The problem is that I run into in the game is they don't synergize exceptionally well with the Royal Forester, just because the Royal Forester only has leadership 10. And having little gank squads of 10 foresters just doesn't cut it. There's not... They struggle against any amount of PD, really. They'll have a little bit of a tough time just because there's not enough of them. I was building them, hoping to be able to use them to counter-raid against the goblins, but well, you'll see how it goes. The Landless Knight is neat. They're fairly heavy infantry, protection 16, Kite Shield, pretty effective. Holding a line, they are very capable for the most part. The thing that hurts with them is the resource cost. 24 resources, and unless you start getting a lot of... I think later on these guys make sense to transition into, but especially in a game like this where you're relying a lot on just numbers, I found these Logrian warriors to be more effective. Like, I could recruit one of them or not quite two of them. Like, two of these guys are 30 resources, one of these guys is 24 resources. So that this just came up better for me in the efficiency category there. The Logrian cavalry is pretty neat too. They're a strong light cavalry. They've got a javelin as well. Low resource cost for cavalry. Not the greatest protection or anything like that, but if you mix these in with some of your heavier knights, they'll be pretty effective. Going to skip over the Wardens right now because they are sacred and look at the other cavalry first. You've got the Knights of Man, who are a good heavy cav unit. You can recruit these guys out of any fort. They are expensive resource-wise, but they're heavy cav. Big, high damage lance charge, high damage broadsword, high strength, high attack skill. Like, these guys have better than human stats. Again, because they're these Logrians who are bigger and stronger than a normal human. Good morale, good defense skill, all that sort of stuff. And then you have one of the coolest units that man has on offer, and one that I utilized heavily, and that's the Knight of Avalon. These guys are beasts. They're not sacred, so you can't bless them, but they are high protection, fast, exceptionally killy cavalry, because they have 3 attacks plus the lance charge. They've got the broadsword and the hoof, which every heavy cavalry is going to have. Like, he's got a broadsword and a hoof. Light cavalry tends to only have the 1 attack. In this case, it's the light lance. But this heavy cavalry, they've got the broadsword and the hoof. These guys also have the broadsword and the hoof, and because they're riding on a unicorn, they also have a magical horn attack. So very, very good if you're having to deal with any kind of ethereal creatures, anything that can only be harmed by magic weapons. Well, here's your magic weapons. So very, very strong unit. And they're tough. They performed very well for me. Apologies for what might be a bit of a awkward transition here, but I realized I forgot to talk about the Wardens, even though I said I'd come back to them. Middle-aged man has these Wardens of Avalon, who are their only sacred unit, and circumstantially I think they can be quite useful, but they're certainly not a powerhouse sacred by any stretch of the imagination. They're not something to build your nation around, that's for sure. Basically, they're a heavy infantry, high protection, and they've got a big F-off greatsword that does a huge amount of damage. So these guys are useful if you are in a situation where you're needing to deal with something that is big and tough and hard to kill, because they will hit it, and they will hit it very, very hard, and you can stack a bless on them to make them more durable in that sort of a matchup, make them hit harder, make them hit better. Like, you take a bit of a fire bless, give them some attack skill, take a bit of a water bless, give them some defense skill. Like, these guys take a rainbow bless reasonably well, but at the same time, especially in a game like this, I did not invest in a bless for them, so I didn't build them. The other cool thing about them is they are stealthy, so you can pair them up with either your Lord Wardens or your Royal Foresters and send out stealthy raiding parties. One thing that might be kind of interesting would be to take a Warden with a bunch of Foresters and Wardens to go and mess up an enemy's back line in a pretty serious way. So that's a possibility. They've also got forest survival and some cool stuff like that. But with a bless, these guys can be pretty effective. But barring that, again, in this game, just not what I relied on. I leaned on these knights instead because they're more useful out of the box. So yeah, back to talking about man's interesting and unique communions. Again, I mean, I'm not a master at... This is the first time I've played Man. I'm sure there's a lot of other cool stuff that you can do with them. I didn't really get to, because of the nature of the game, didn't get much of a chance to play around with one of their unique mechanics, which is how they do communions. And I'll just get into... What is it? S. Pop into here, they get a unique spell called Chorus Master and Chorus Slave, which lets you get into communions using nature magic. And the other cool thing about this is normally with a communion, when your communion masters are casting away at their spells, it builds up the fatigue in the communion slaves. And if you build that up too high, it actually starts killing off your communion slaves. Not with course communions. If you build up enough fatigue that you pass out, you just drop out of the communion. So on the one hand, it makes your communions a little bit more fragile because they'll fall apart sooner. But on the other hand, you don't actually lose the communion slaves. So again, I didn't get a chance to play around with this at all in this game. It just, there wasn't any need to. It didn't go that long. But that's a really cool mechanic that Man has that is quite potent, especially when you consider that all of your mages are what they have this spell singer tag, which means that it takes more time to cast spells, but they take less fatigue. So it makes Man's communions slow but sustainable, and sustainability in communions is a big deal. So yeah, going to just talk briefly about God design, and then what I think I might do is sort of appended to the end of this video, I'm going to attach the pre-game banter from Battlemode and I, where we talk a bit about our nation picks and that sort of stuff. And then I'm going to get into the game. So let's talk about the god that I ended up picking. Again, because of the nature of the game, with it being a blitz and with it being a duel, I went for the thrice-horned boar, the big pig. He's mainly because I think, especially in a duel, you want to be able to expand fast. You need to be able to like make hay while the sun shines and get your hands on as much territory as possible in that initial expansion phase. And the big pig lets you do that. He's an exceptionally good expander, mostly because of that trample tag. But you get enchantment on this guy, get him up to enchantment 2, have him cast personal regeneration on himself, and he's really, really tough to kill. The other advantage to having him, I think, especially in a blitz and in a duel, is it gives you something almost like a queen on a chessboard. He's a very, very powerful unit, especially on the defense. And that can be really important. Holding off an early rush can make a huge difference in whether or not you're going to actually win a game like this. Because you have to expect an early rush in a duel. Like, the whole point is to kill one opponent quickly. And he can prevent that from happening. Because it takes Man a little bit of time to build up, I think. You need the time to get those knights out, to get those troops out, to get some research off the ground, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, there is my the chassis I took. As for how I built him, I went 4 earth, 2 nature. My bless was a very simple double reinvigoration. This is budget. This is an incredibly budget build because I wanted him awake and I wanted to still have good scales. I went up to Dominion 5. I took productivity 3. I took heat 3. 2 points of order and 1 point of growth, and that was it. And this seemed to work fairly well for me. He would fall off pretty hard in a longer game, and I actually had a much more complicated looking idea involving like an imprisoned, rainbow bless, pretender. Here, have a sec, I'll find her here. That I would totally play in a, yeah, here we go. I'd totally play this in a longer multiplayer game where there's less of a concern about getting rushed, but you can see I've got much better scales. Yeah, she's imprisoned, but I've still got the reinvigoration. I've got precision to help out my my spellcasters a bit more. Arcane finesse later in the game that could get you punching through like magic defenses if you wanted to hex people and turn them into frogs and stuff like that. There's some neat stuff you can do with nature magic. Withering weapons. I mostly did this because I wanted to have the death, or I'd want to have the death because there's some cool stuff you can do with death magic as man. But yeah, so that would be if I was playing a full-length game, I'd play somebody like her, potentially, or play around with it at least. But yeah, so that's my introduction to man as a nation. Tried to keep it relatively brief, and at this point I'm going to hop over into the banter between, or the pregame chat between Battlemode and myself, and we'll, after that we should have the first turn up in the next episode. So until then, cheers. So yeah, this should be an interesting matchup, I think. I'm glad you ended up going with Shinuyama. I think it'd be an interesting matchup versus man. Like I think they're similar nations in a lot of ways with their recruit anywheres, like their foreign recruits and stuff like that. I think it's a cool matchup. Not sure if you've seen my god name yet, but I'm kind of wearing my pretender design on my sleeve.
So am I, but I've kind of encoded it a little bit, so we'll see if that one works or not.
Yeah.
I've given you a hint. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I've never played Shinuyama. I played Yomi, but I've never played them in multiplayer. I played Yomi once or a couple of times in single player, and I really like them. I mostly play early age, so for me, I like middle age. Middle age is great. The only reason I've not played it very much is purely because I just wanted to work my way through all the early age nations first, which is kind of a long job.
Yeah, no kidding. When you've got as many nations as Dominions has, I think you've got some cool stuff though. Like those Daibakemono were no joke. Like they're powerful heavy infantry. So that'll be an interesting matchup between them and the cavalry from man.
Well, I think that the key to using these guys will be like with Jotunheim, which will be you've got to mix and match your troops, because size 1 troops are really, really strong, and it looks like Yomi only had the undisciplined Bakemono.
Yeah,
these guys got disciplined ones now, so that's really interesting. I'm interested to see how they work. But
well, that's a huge difference for attack density, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, even I'm sitting there thinking through how I'm going to deal with hordes of goblins, and I ended up landing on the foresters as potential, because at least they're going to be able to match them for attack density. Even because they've got the 2 attacks plus the bow. So
it's going to be interesting. I like I said, I've literally only just started looking at what this nation's really like. They've been in my peripheral vision for a little while, but I've never really kind of had a good look at them. But they got some interesting stuff. Like we've got assassins, a really strong assassin as well. Like reputedly one of the better assassins in the game, like non-magic assassins. And then the Bakemono sorcerers, no joke either.
No kidding.
Real super combatant chassis. So yeah, like there's some interesting stuff. I've just got to figure out how to use it.
Yeah, well, and same deal with man, right? Like, I mean, you've got the Knights of Avalon, who are exceptional heavy cavalry, but not sacred.
Yeah,
And
right.
so I mean, you're really kind of relying on the scales there, and like the wardens. When I thought you were going to be playing Jotunheim for a second there, I was frantically debating whether or not I should go back and redesign a pretender to give them a strength buff or something like that, just so they'd have a better chance of chopping through the hit points on your giants. But
I kind of went back on that idea. The reason being is because I was like, right, okay, I'll have a pretender made, and the only pretender I had made was um an Irminsul with a regeneration bless, and I was just like, oh no, that's not going to be that fun for you.
yeah,
If I just run it with regenerating giants, like it's just going to be like I made that for what was that for? I ended up only playing it in single player. I think I actually made that as a chassis for a multiplayer game I never ended up playing.
okay, yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
but yeah, I thought, but no, Shiniyama, interesting. And like when you said you were going to play Man, I was like, okay, if you've not played Man, I've not played Shiniyama, so this will be fair. It'll be a fair fight. And also, apparently, it's really, really easy to expand with these guys because you just literally just throw goblins and stuff.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think the challenge that Shiniyama's going to run into is the sustain on expansion, because you're going to take casualties, right?
Yeah, but not many. And I think that like the way I understand it from some of the guides I've been looking at, you get about 50 or 60 Bakemono show with the spears, and
Oh,
they
sweet
repel.
Jesus.
And they've so you throw those at stuff and they'll lose about 5-10 per turn, but they're so cheap. They're just
Yeah.
you can
So-
crap them out. So
So, in other
I
words,
think
what you're telling me is Rush Thunderstrike?
you can try, yeah. See if it goes, see how that works.
Yeah.
I haven't taken a shock resistance bless, so that you might find that
Well,
works.
you don't have any sacred troops either.
No
Until you
sacred
start getting
troops,
into summons, right? Like,
yeah, these guys are apparently these are a real big summons power. Like
Yeah.
they've got loads and loads of. I'm just looking now. They've got loads of summons.
Well, and
Like they've got more than any other nation, I think, probably.
it's very similar. I mean, not so much the summoning, but communions are a big thing with man, which
Yeah.
be interesting if the game ends up going to that point. But I mean, and both of us, this is our first duel, so who knows?
How
This
does
might
it
be
work?
half
They
an
don't.
hour.
You don't have what do you call it? You don't have astral, do you?
Oh
So
no, but
they've got the spell singing.
Man has a special. It's a unique spell that only man can cast, called Chorus Master and Chorus Slave.
Oh, okay. So
and it basically lets you get into a communion through nature.
that was it. And then if you drop out of the communion, it doesn't actually kill the.
Doesn't kill them. Yeah, if you once you pass out, you just drop out of the communion instead, which makes them quite a bit more durable. At least long term. I mean, the individual battles, I think you'll still burn through it just as quick, but at least you're not replacing a whole bunch of communion slaves after the fact.
Have you done much with communions? Because I've used them quite a lot with with Blood Nations particularly. They're hard to use, but they are super fun. They're really good fun.
The only nation I have a ton of experience with communions in is Phalegra, and Phalegra's kind of notorious for having some of the hottest burning communions in the game. Like you just get, because you're mucking about with cross paths, you've got human chassis, it's ugly, and so I find I really limit how many communions I end up using, and I make a lot of bows for my mages.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. No, communions are really good fun. The only thing is that it becomes, in a big long game, it starts getting tiresome towards the end. And if you're like me and you start getting fatigued at the end of long Dominions games,
oh yes,
then they can be a real problem. So yeah, like especially if you're doing it with Blood Nations are even worse, because you've got Blood Micro on top of it.
You've got the whole blood economy on top of everything else. Yeah, I've never done much blood. Like, that's one in the multiplayer game I'm in right now, again with middle-aged Phalegra, I've got I've broken into blood in a pretty significant way, but I'm certainly not a blood power. And even that, like, I've only got like maybe 4 or 5 blood hunting provinces, and just the micro of remembering to shuffle everything around is pretty intensive.
just remember your hotkeys. There's Shift Z and Shift V.
Yeah, no, totally. Lifesavers.
Yeah. Lifesavers, man. Because I actually watched Lucid doing it was an episode on his Lanka series, and he was like, okay, just for this one episode, I'm actually gonna just play and show you what happens during the late game blood economy, and then you'll see like
how ridiculous it can get.
Yeah. It's big like that. Were you playing? No, I don't think you didn't play in the game where I was playing Lanka and Draxi ended up winning as Mixlan.
No, I was not.
Okay, so like that went into the late game, and I just had the worst game because I was doing well. Like I always play the Diplo really well in the early game, so I was like I had got a lot of space, and I'm quite good at bullying my way into more space basically. But I just didn't have any population. So with Lanka, you've got basically two options. Well, no, you've got loads of options, but you've got two kind of main thrusts that your strategy can go down. Right, you've got blood or death. And you can do the undead thing, or you can do blood. They've got other stuff as well. They could do like pretty strong nature. They are pretty strong in air, so they've got some cool stuff, right? But for the most part, you need an end game plan in these games, and I think
totally. And blood is always a solid end game.
Yeah, and blood is the one. So I was basically I was doing something that I learned off Lucid, which is when you've not got much population, you just blood hunt your population into the ground. And then anything that's left, you ghoulify it, so you just turn it into ghouls. And that destroys your population too. So you basically
on the other side of it, we've got the game that we're in right now, the early age game where I'm playing Abysian. You've got Ulm, and I'm currently just in the hanging on by the skin of my teeth here, blood hunting my capital to the ground. So.
Abysia have to do that. It's like Abysia, they're not a blood power. They can do. They need to get into blood later on. This is one of the things that I think originally, before people figured out that blood, that bark skin. What is it? Bark skin and blood bond.
Blood bond, yeah.
Yeah. It's like the kind of classic Van Heer bless, isn't it? So yeah, once people started doing that, it kind of changed the way that Abysia played. Apparently, but I think before that, it was kind of. You're relying on these really good fire mages, but then fire sort of tails off like a little bit later on.
As soon as somebody with water 2 researches rain.
Yeah, I mean it's not that bad. I think that's overstated. I've got to tell you. It is bad. Like it is. It makes everything way harder to do. But the sheer power of the anathemant salamanders and all that is just you can be bringing weight, like your guns are already huge, so really what's happening is you're nerfing your big guns a little bit, but it really isn't a big. I think if rain's pretty bad, but you can get around it.
I think if you're smart and you do stuff like make sure you take reinvigoration on your bless and stuff like that, it helps quite a bit.
Yeah, right. But then you have to translate into blood later because they don't have an end game.
100%, yeah. Well, and even in situations like this, where one thing I am discovering is Abysia plays I don't know, we'll find out in the next couple turns here, I guess, but Abysia plays remarkably well on defense, I think.
I'm struggling with that game, I've got to be honest. The last 3 or 4 turns, I've really just been kind of hitting next turn and just trying to gauge where to go, but I think even like I've just not really, my head's not really been in it, and I get this real bad problem with Dominions games where if I feel like I'm losing the thread of what I'm doing, whether it's because I'm not paying attention or because something derails me in some way, I really start to phase out of it, and one of the reasons why I've been taking longer with my turns over the last couple of days is because I'm trying to figure out how to end this war. Because the thing is, I'm at war with everyone, okay, apart from Kale.
I have been. That was a little bit of Diplo on my end.
Yeah, no, I knew it. I knew that. Like, I was like, right, this is a small game, and I think the way to play this will be to practice. I did this with Statist as well in another game, and I did really well there as well. But like, I'm just practicing fighting as much as possible. The problem is with Ulm, I've kind of run out of steam now, so I'm like, right. I've got really high research. My research is really good. Yeah. For this part of the game, because I really rush research, and I've got a great sage pretender. So like, I've got lots of tools. I just don't really. I've kind of like, I've made that classic noob error of relying on one tactic, which was
lots of axe warriors.
lots of axe warriors. But the thing is, I've got like that. You know, it doesn't. It works until it doesn't work, and then you get more spells and it works again. But there's other things that I've been doing as well, like like the thugging with quickness and temper flesh. I don't know if I've used that on you or whether
a little bit, yeah. I
so
mean, the challenge there for you, I think, is balancing that out when I'm assassinating pretty regularly.
Oh, the way to get around assassins is the fact that I can spam out commanders like they're
like
going
nobody's
out
business. Yeah, they come from everywhere.
But I've not really been doing that, so I've kind of I've fallen off it. I need to refocus on that game. I think what I'm going to do is after we played this, I'm going to play my turn, and then from tomorrow I need to sit and like look at it for an hour or two and just be like, right, how do I rescue this game now?
What now?
Yeah, what now? Because you know, Hyde's kind of hanging on, but he says, oh, I'm just out of the game. I just want to kill. I'm just going to fuck anybody up who comes anywhere near me. Basically, that's what he's saying. Although I think Fomoriu have got the capability of being able to strike back.
Oh yeah, no, they're definitely still a threat. He's got a lot of those bar guests and stuff like that summoned up, and he's got a pretty decent bless. So it'd be interesting to see if he's able to turn things around there.
I think he can. If he, the sleeping giants is Kale. Now Kale's right. I'm playing Shadow Empire with him at the moment, and I'll tell you something about that guy. Right, he's really, really, really good at understating how strong he is. And I'm not saying he's not like he's honest, right? So he doesn't lie, but he will drastically understate how strong he is and how well he's doing. That's his modus operandi. Like he's been doing it in our Shadow Empire game. Now the thing is with Shadow Empire, once you get spies into someone's nation, you can kind of see all their graphs, the equivalent of the graphs. So you can see what they've built, where their technology is at. So when he's kind of doing the same thing that he does in Dominions, where he's like, oh, I'm not really that big, and I'm struggling to expand. No, you can see everything.
He's big.
Yeah, he's huge. Yeah. I don't know how I've not even been focusing on Kale in the Dominions game, apart from Hyde. Hyde's modus operandi, by the way, is to whip everyone into a frenzy about certain things, just like I kind of do that as well.
Yep.
But Hyde's really good at that. So he's been kind of going, oh, you've got to watch out for Kale because Kale's really big. And I'm like, I'm not even focusing on him. I'm just trying to kill Abysian at the moment and fight Agartha off. Like, Agartha's not playing well, I don't think.
No,
I think he's...
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. Quite passive, which is a little bit odd for Agartha.
Yeah, I think he's getting used to the nation. He's actually Manvera is actually quite a good player. I've seen him like I've played several games with him, and he's competent. He's probably he's as good as I am. I'd say he's probably about the same kind of skill level as me, which is not very good. Like I'm one of these people who knows loads about Dominions because I watch shitloads of videos on it, so I know loads of stuff about it. When it comes to actually playing, I'm really not that good.
Yeah,
I like playing single player. Hey, let's get this game going anyway.
Yeah, totally. I think I've sent my turn in already, so.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna log off and do my recording, and then
for sure.
I'll get on.
I will,
okay, man.
I will see you in a bit.
Okay, see you later.